Hi, everybody. I am Tim Schroeder, owner of Schroeder Amplification, here just outside of Chicago in Highland Park, Illinois. I'd feel remiss if I didn't mention that I have a new website up, which is schroederamplification.com. Same one, though it is greatly improved with hi-fi goodies, etc. So go there. So today I have a good friend of mine, Killick Hinds. For those of you who are not familiar with these programs, it is a regularly scheduled event happening weekly. And typically it's just kind of a conversational bit with kind of friends and people in my orbit, musically speaking, where we can just kind of, stretch out a little bit, chat, and say something interesting to me, at least, because these are, often people that I've known for decades or more. So, our conversations in the same room often kind of get funneled into one topic. I'm actually, it's interesting for me to sit here and to ask others questions. So hopefully it is to everybody else as well. So again, this is Killick Hinds. You and I met what, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, something like that.
At least 7 or 8, yeah.
All right. You could probably just check the date on your DB7. So a little bit about you for people who may not know you. So I have found you to be extraordinarily prolific. When you go to your Bandcamp site, you have, for a while, it was every single day you had a release, which meant that you recorded something, that you, of course, played it while you were recording it, that you put thought into it, you mastered it, you got it up onto Bandcamp somehow, and almost one a day, it's pretty amazing. You have played with, you're a talented writer, a musician, an art curator, as we can see behind you. Yeah, I mean, you've worked with greats from like Michael Manring, Tim Schroeder, Henry Kaiser, and many, many, many more. So yeah, with that, I guess I can just kind of start with asking you your history. Kind of it's the inception of music in you, kind of how it started, your path to get to where you are.
Oh, wow. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you to everybody who's tuning in. So I suppose I started with just the real interest in sound in general. From my earliest memories, I can recall just being interested in hearing a lot of environmental sounds, whether they were, industrial or nature derived. And those things made just as much of an impression on me, the different types of noises and hisses and hums and buzzes as conventional music did. Conventional music also played a huge part. By the age of 3, I was exposed to Chicago and Diana Ross and Donna Summer and Cat Stevens, things like that.
Sure.
And all of that was probably, it was the pop music of the day, but it had a depth that I think is enduring and certainly excited me. Mm-hmm. You probably didn't suspect that all this came from Diana Ross, but
doesn't everything stem from Diana Ross, really?
Yes. So I began. I think my first real musical foray was singing in the chorus or the choir in elementary school. I was not a natural. I had a very difficult time with rhythm, and I had a very difficult time with remembering the words, and also the melodies and the harmonies. So
besides from that,
besides that, it was fine.
Yeah.
Nobody would have suspected I would go on to, keep doing this with my life. And then I started playing the recorder by maybe the 4th grade. These were the sort of plastic flute type instruments. Mm-hmm. I was not a virtuoso, but I could sort of make sound with it. And I think that's what was interesting to me. It wasn't necessarily reproducing the expectations of creating songs or compositions. I was just interested in the sounds. And even though I wasn't very good at playing them, I just like to hear sonic events, you know, and these sort of little snippets. I realized much later that they're a hallmark of what would be considered in a lot of cultures shamanic musical presentation, where the musical information, it might be in service of a healing ritual, or it might just be for you know, group bonding or even entertainment, but it's usually characterized by interruptions in the flow of things. So you don't necessarily have a static beat, which is the hallmark of trance music. Trance, you know, just by a steady rhythm can help initiate, you know, altered states of consciousness, or, you know, whereas shamanic music demands a little bit more attention. You can't kind of just zone out and bliss out, because it can often change direction abruptly, or speed up, slow down. You know, all the different musical possibilities are there, and so that was my sort of natural inclination to something that I learned much later has, you know, essentially ancient human roots. You know, there's not a lot of reinforcement for this, you know, when you're listening to the radio, and you know, and I enjoy all the regular music as well, you know, but I always kind of felt like when I started playing guitar at age 12 that I needed to learn how to play the different styles of music. You know, I think the very first thing I did with guitar, or at least the first lesson I had, was we did Smoke on the Water and things like that. So, and I really tried over the years to actually like really imbue playing those styles with the love I had for just the pure sound making, without any sort of associations. And I never quite got there. I've enjoyed playing in the genres, and over the years, you know, it encompassed rock music and punk, hardcore, metal, classical, jazz, country, and any other miscellaneous things that I at least dabbled in. But most of those I kind of took to their logical conclusion for my own sort of artistic happiness or musical happiness. And what remains is just that interest in creating something new each time, you know. So I learned, again, years after I started, that what I'm doing is the art of improvisation. Typically, I do sometimes compose, you know, and I look at composition as sort of preordained improvisation, and you know, so sometimes and occasionally I'll even put things, you know, I'll write them whether in standard notation or just kind of word instructions, flow charts. But mostly I just kind of play, and I feel over the years I've gotten fairly adept at combining disparate elements and disparate genre references, and you know, into kind of a whole. And so I'm happy with that aspect of how it's unfolded, for sure.
You know, it's what hearing you say that out loud, of course, is probably why you and I get along so well in terms of music. You know, I've certainly felt the same way. And you know, just a kind of a side note here, talking about kind of the U.S. and the traditional you know, learning facilities, we'll call them schools, etc. You know, that you know, I don't know if the teacher necessarily commended you for finding other things in the music that weren't supposed to be there in grade school, you know. But you know, I was the same way, you know, and I, you know, I almost at some point I felt like a failure because I could be out blues licked, you know, which of course isn't necessarily my interest. And but you know, when when I just kind of meditated and let things flow, really wonderful things happened,
Yeah.
and I had to become okay with what I was doing. And you put a lovely label on it and make me feel better about myself. But that's really important.
Well, I'm sure you can out blues lick me, actually. So we'll have a contest after this meeting. Yeah, I feel like when you and I have made music together, and we've made 2 proper albums, and they're very proper, actually. The exchange of ideas is it's really an extension of our friendship. An extension of our friendship, I should say. And this to me is really important. I hear so many stories about bands that 10, 20 years down the road, they don't even talk to each other. They're not even interested in being in a room with somebody. So they don't, whatever initial spark that they had with their music and the connection they have with their audience is just taken over by business. And my approach is to never have any business, just never, just make my business constant, evolution or devolution, as the case may be.
Sure.
And so I never get stuck, or I never get frustrated, because there's always the next project. Even if something's not going swimmingly, the chance for redemption or validation is right around the corner, and that's exciting to me. I don't have a repertoire that I have to reproduce, night after night, which can work. People have different relationships to sound and the actual vocation,
of course,
of music, and for some people that really works fine. Some of those aspects are totally fine, and that's wonderful, and it's great, and I enjoy those things. I mean, I love listening to people who play every show like it's their very first or their very last. They're just totally there from start to finish, and that to me is totally exciting. And so I'm just as enthusiastic with each show, in each project, so everyone is the best thing I've ever done, because it's the best I can do in the time I'm doing it. So I never feel stagnant, which is great. And I think a lot of it was relaxing my own internal pressure, or maybe even societal pressure, about what does it mean to be a musician.
Sure. Well, and I know that all musicians are looking to get kind of in the zone, so to speak. And I feel with this type of music, it's particularly important. I mean, you really have to. I mean, you really have to kind of almost, meditate. I'm using meditate properly.
Yeah.
Kind of meditate your way into it. Just by meditate, I mean just allowing it to flow, getting into that place where you're very present, and this is what's happening now.
Yep.
And in that regard, can you listen to this style of music once it's recorded? Because I know that in the moment it's very, very satisfying. Just after the moment, it's very satisfying. But I listen back, and I really have to be in the right mindset in order to kind of get involved again.
I know what you mean. So assuming you're in the zone, in retrospect, you go back with your critical ear, your critical discernment, and sometimes when things are exposed to to the light, maybe it's not quite as special as you thought it was. But I find that I'm able to accept what happened when I know that I was completely there. I was completely with it the whole time, in the zone, or in that kind of flow state, the magical liminal space. So when I'm there, I really have no worries about how it will come across, on reflection. Occasionally I can hear, occasionally, it's not a foolproof system for me or anybody, but occasionally circumstances intervene, or there's an obvious rhythm hiccup, that really was not a good rhythm hiccup.
Sure.
And those things can jut out. But
Can
even
bring right
those,
back to grade school, can't they?
yeah. I'm actually okay with those things as well too. Because essentially every time I'm doing this, I'm sort of reaching. I'm reaching beyond my my training and my practice regimens and my enculturation. So I'm trying for something a little bit extra, a little bit outside of my known operating parameters, and so it's okay if there's a hiccup. The other thing is there's something called editing, and you can take a hiccup and you can,
Sure.
make it disappear. No, but I tend not to edit much. If something's really egregious, or if I'm doing work for a project that has the certain expectation of tempo regularity, or time signature regularity, or just alignment of eighth notes or whatever it is, then there are different types of music, and some need to adhere to the standard for sure. But yeah, when I'm freely improvising, I don't really worry too much. I think about all the stuff. If you make a mistake, do it again and call it jazz.
Yeah. That's what I was taught. Do it 4 times.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, and I've gotten away from that. Like if I make a mistake, I just let it be, and I let it inspire something new or some other pathway that wouldn't have occurred.
Yeah.
To go ahead and hit the clunker again, it's one way to sort of, like, I suppose it's about saving face, or demonstrating, I'm such a brilliant musician that I meant to do that thing that actually caused you to think I didn't know what I was doing, but I meant it. So I'm not worried about these meta analyses of what mistakes or perceived mistakes mean. Also, I want it to be fun. I don't really want to get real heavy about it.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about a little bit about your collaborations with others.
Yeah.
Because again, you're very prolific, and if I encourage folks watching to go check out your Bandcamp site and just see the vast amount and varying pieces that are on there. And you've collaborated with people all over the place. I mean, again, from people, Michael Manring, Tim Schroeder, Killick Hinds, Heinrich Kaiser, but all sorts of people. Can you enlighten us on that and just kind of talk about some of the things you're up to now, perhaps? Or
Sure. Yeah. Collaborations are extremely special to me. You mentioned Henry Kaiser, and I don't think these are available anymore, but these are pretty much my last copies of 2 albums that Henry and I have made. I think Henry may be joining in California right now, so hello, and I know he says hello to Tim, an old friend. So we made these 2 albums. Let's see. This one was recorded in 2016. I really like, actually, the back cover.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. You can tell which one is Henry's arm and which one is mine, right? Yeah, these photos were taken by Brandy Gale, Henry's wife.
All right.
And and then this one was maybe 4 years before that.
All right.
And meeting Henry, we met at a festival in Birmingham, Alabama. And this was around the year 2010. I think it was 2010. And I got to see Henry perform, and he saw me perform, but we didn't have a chance to play together. But as he was leaving for the night, he just said, "Hey, next time we meet, let's do a duo." He knew I had a Teufel Tesla guitar made by Ulrich Teufel in Germany, and he has one as well. And so he said, let's have a duo with the Teufel Teslas. And I just thought, well, that sounds great. I mean, this is pretty exciting when somebody that I, was reading about in magazines, when I was a teenager, I was like, wow, this is amazing. So, but I thought, well, this will never happen, you know, and then it did happen. So I think a big thing I've learned from Henry is that oftentimes the difference between a collaboration and not having one is just asking, you know, and Henry, I think, is really masterful at just asking, hey, would you like to play together? And it had never occurred to me in that way. I mean, before I met Henry, of course, I'd worked with people, but the idea of just going up to a stranger and saying, hey, let's make an album, you know, I don't think that really occurred to me. So that was a big shift in my thinking and my my horizons, you know, being expanded. So that's pretty special.
Right on. You know, and of course I met Henry when I was working for Gary Brower in San Francisco, and you know, I was always very impressed, you know, by the things he was doing. Of course, I was a guitar jockey, you know, doing repairs and that kind of thing, and you know, I was always impressed by. I didn't know who he was, or don't know that we even really met until you know, me being there for a year or so. But just seeing these really interesting guitars, all with a very specific and mindful purpose across my bench, and Gary's and Chris's, whoever was there. You know, it always impressed me, and you know, it always made me wonder what it was for, you know. And you know, and he was kind enough to you know, to have me over to his house and see his instrument collection, his record collection, which is spectacular. His vinyl collection. This was 20 odd years ago or something like that. But you know, truly a good guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so that really that changed my thinking, and that's part of my expanded realm of working with people, especially people who I've not met in person, you know, people who I've just corresponded with over the internet or email. And this past year, because you know, because of COVID, I don't think what I do is all that unique in this moment. That's actually kind of the only way to work with people now is through correspondence. So I had a little bit of a head start, certainly, you know, in terms of being used to doing that. You know, but all of my touring, all my traveling is, you know, came to essentially an abrupt stop. And so this year, in a way, I've kind of stepped up the collaborations. Worked with a lot of amazing artists. I know I'll forget somebody, but I'll name a few at least. Nick Vander, who lives in Mexico, he's in Cholula. So he and I did a duo album, which was, you know, again, everything I do is my favorite thing, and you know, and a big highlight. So for this, I'm eternally thankful. So let's see, Alvaro Domine, who lives in upstate New York. We did a video collaboration together, and then a full album that's actually coming out on his record label, Eluso Records. It's coming out at the beginning of March. And that's, again, one of my favorite things. It's really cool. It's that one to me is a really great long listen, you know, in terms of you know, just put on the headphones and whatever you want to call it, you know, bliss out, or you know, Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd it. So I'm not advocating anything, or not advocating anything. So let's see, who else have I worked with? Lots of extraordinary people through the community project in Portugal. This is put together by truly, again, all these people are just so wonderful as musicians. Javier Subatin is the organizer, and he's a great guitarist and composer. But he's basically he's curated this this really wonderful thing that gets people collaborating. You know, people from different scenes and different countries collaborating with each other, and then also a chance for people to exhibit their own solo performances. So it's been a really steady presence. You know, each month I turn in a solo video and then a record, just an audio duo with somebody. Javier assigns the person, usually at random, and then we just collaborate. We figure it out, and it can be composed or semi-composed or entirely improvised. And the things I've done have run the gamut of that. So I've worked with Max Diller, a trumpeter from Germany, Francesca Remighi, drummer from Italy, and this is where I need a cheat sheet and I don't have one. I just worked with a really wonderful guitarist named Mane Fernandez, and a double bassist named Zay Almeida, and a pianist, Marta Sanchez. So this is extraordinary. It's really great, and this stuff would never have happened if it wasn't for COVID. So with all the the difficulties and hardships, it's really heartening to see somebody like Javier put so much soul into a project, and it continues to expand, and there's talk of perhaps turning into a record label of sorts, or entirely a record label, just around that alone. So
you've so far, I believe you've been speaking about being an instrumentalist and doing collaborations, but you've also kind of worn the hat of producer and helped some young bands along, just kind of helped form their musical ideas, etc., maybe to give them a nudge in different directions.
Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind that was pretty fun and just completely out of left field for me was there was a YouTube sensation, a group of teenage sisters in Mexico. Actually, weren't even, some of them weren't even teenagers yet. They were kids, and they're called The Warning, and they did a cover of Enter Sandman by Metallica. I believe that was the video that got a lot of attention. And so a couple years after their sort of viral breakout, they were in the process of putting together what became their second album, and through my good friend Rick Toon, an instrument builder, he somehow, I guess he was talking with The Warning's father, who's at the time was their manager, and Daniela, the guitarist, plays a Rick Toon guitar, and so that was the part of the connection. And so anyway, I guess they got talking, and the idea was to help find different pathways to achieve their sort of their take on sort of like hard rock, or pop metal, we'll call it, and not with the idea that they would drop being a band and start being improvising musicians, but with just with an eye towards getting the process of creativity loosened up a little bit. Because necessarily if you're in a band that's playing like radio friendly music, things can be quite linear. Things can be quite locked to grid, as they say, with the DAWs. And so what would happen if you start if you turn off the the quantization feature and you start just letting things flow? And again, what has to be confronted is the fear of making mistakes, or seeming like you're making mistakes. And so anyway, my wife Delene and I, we flew down to Monterrey in Nuevo León, Mexico, and didn't really know how it was going to unfold, but it was a lot of fun. And they're conventionally speaking, they're really fantastic musicians. It was amazing because at the time Ale was maybe 13 years old, the bassist, and and we were at dinner one night, and she was just talking about when they opened for Def Leppard in a stadium, You
Wow.
know, and she was definitely talking past tense. I mean, it happened a while before I was there.
Huh.
So, and she was just saying, yeah, you know, when we opened for Def Leppard, you know, it's really funny because, you know, she was a kid and, but a very professional bass player kid.
Mhm.
And, you know, as solid as anybody I've ever worked with, on bass, on drums, on guitar, you know, all of them. And their singing is great, you know, and their songwriting is excellent. And, you know, so they continue to have a buzz. They're working on, or they finished up their third album. I believe it's the third. But when we were there, we made an album, and it wasn't attributed to the Warning, and it didn't have any promotional release or anything. It was just basically a snapshot of a few days of having fun and seeing what's possible.
Yeah.
And it's, to me, it's
you know, it an exercise, if you will, or
what's that?
Was it an exercise, if you will, for the kids, or was it just a collaborative effort that was just a lot of fun?
It was a collaborative effort that was a lot of fun.
All right.
And you know, and I play on it a bit, and but it's mostly them, and I didn't tell them what to do so much as I helped them discover different ideas that they possessed already. You know, and it's really, it's fun. It's called No Mistake Mixtape, and the band name is Slabs and Blooms, which is a nod to the iron forging history in Monterrey, Mexico. So, yeah, so Slabs and Blooms, and they're just credited under their, you know, under their personal names. You know, it's not the Warning. And every once in a while, a Warning fan will find it, and I'd be curious to see what they think. Some of it has, you know, like, you know, has beats. Some of it has nice contours, you know, diatonic melodies, that sort of thing. And then some of it's, you know, as weird as it gets. And I think it's beautiful.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about let's talk about instruments, because you have a significant instrument collection. And they're not, you know, it's not like I've got 15 64 Strats, whatever. I mean, it's they're you know, so I'm a luthier, right? You know, I make instruments, etc. You know, I think I know what's going on, but you know, every time we talk with each other, I'm like, who does what now? And like, it's like mind blowing. The people, I mean, really, you know, the people that, you know, I mean, I live in a pretty tight vacuum. In fact, it's hard to breathe in here sometimes. But you know, you seem to find these people, and you just make substantial things with these people. If you could elaborate on that, I guess.
Wow. Well, I mean, I'm the lucky one, you know, having friends who've entertained my ideas, you know, and yeah, I think the idea of departure from regular guitar, it started occurring to me by the time I was, let's see, I'd moved here, so I was probably in my early 20s, you know, and I started having this idea of, well, actually, yeah, I would say like 1993 is probably when I started having these ideas of expanding the possibilities of guitar. And at first, what it really was about expanding the range, you know, just going into a lower register. And this is well before 7-string guitars were widespread or popular. But I had the idea to have a 7-string guitar. I can't say it was an original idea, but it was certainly uncommon at the time. And I'm aware George Van Epps was, and Bucky Pizzarelli, and they, you know, in the 70s, they were playing 7-string archtop guitars.
Sure.
And then, you know, there are Russian, I guess you could call them classical guitars from the 1800s with 7 strings, you know, and so it wasn't a new idea by any stretch, but you couldn't just go to Guitar Center at the time and buy a 7-string acoustic guitar. Yeah. So I commissioned the first guitar, you know, the first like custom made guitar that I ever had in 1995, or maybe a little bit earlier, but it was finished in 1995 Wood Sound Studios in Maine, and where I was living at the time. And it's yeah, like a dreadnought, but with an extra low string. And even though that's not a big deal these days, that was kind of a big deal back then. And I'm kind of still wrapping my head around how or why I decided to go that route. But that sort of got me interested in figuring out other ways to expand the capabilities or the performance possibilities of a guitar. And from there, there were a couple of leaps, but then the big breakthrough was working with Fred Carlson in Santa Cruz, California. And I happened upon his work from a magazine, and then I wrote him a letter. You know, this is all this is the internet existed, but it wasn't used for that sort of
Sure.
interaction. So what resulted after, you know, some back and forth for a year or more was the Harpeggione, which is it's got 18 strings, 6 main strings that you play with quarter tone frets, and it's bowable. And then there's also 12 sympathetic strings that resonate in response to what they hear from each other or from the main strings. And it's I love it. It's been my companion for yeah, since it was finished in late 1999. So you know, 21, 22 years coming on. And I've learned most of what I know about performing and diving deep into, you know, the just the physical manifestation of instrument playing from the Harpeggione. It's an extremely difficult instrument to play. And not just conceptually, but physically. You know, it's you know, you really have to dig in, and it's very easy to, because it's got these quarter tone frets. It's very easy to fret out. You know, to have an errant buzz or muted sound. You know, when you're trying to get just a clear tone. But with dedication, it's rewarding. You know, and when I take a step away from it for, you know, for a few days or even a month, I come back, and the inspiration is just endless. It's really it's very satisfying for my soul to play it. And
it's
then,
also what you have tattooed on your forehead, is it not?
I do. I have the headstock. I don't know if you can see it, but the headstock of the Harpeggione is tattooed on my forehead.
Right.
It is not, as kids sometimes think, it is not a shark, and it's not a skateboard. Yeah. So yeah, the Harpeggione, and because it's bowable, you know, there's so many timbres, you know, different sound colors that I can work with. To me, I just love it. That's one of the limitations of just the guitar type instrument for me, is you don't get that range of colors that you can get with a bow. But there are ways around that, and I try to do that.
And I should, at this juncture, I should note that you seem to be you've gone almost entirely fretless on most of your guitar related instruments.
Yeah, I'm looking at them right now. I have about 14 instruments, and yeah, I'd say about half of them are fretless. Yeah, just about half. And to me, fretless, that's another way to sort of increase the musical intrigue. You know, you can slide around. You're not limited to equal temperament. You know, and you can approximate some other tuning systems from around the world, and then also I like using what I call intuitive intonation, where it's just, if it sounds good, then it is good. You know, it's not. Yeah, like I can show you. This is a this is a guitar made by Wes Lamb in North Carolina, and it's an ohm, an OM model, and this is backwards, so I'm trying to. Here we go. Yeah. So what you see on there is something called the Vo 96, and this was made by Paul Vo, who's a good friend of mine in Asheville, and he invented the Moog guitar, which some people might be familiar with. Essentially an infinite sustaining electric guitar, but this is that general concept applied to an acoustic instrument. So if I turn it on, let's see if you can see the light panel. So you see some lights are on, and there's different settings, but I'll just play something. So I'm not doing anything, and it's not plugged in. It just does that on its own, and it can actually it can arpeggiate too. I'll do something with that.
Oh.
So yeah, it's pretty magical. Very celestial overtones, and it uses magnets to either add energy or subtract energy from the strings. It's called 96 because there's 16 harmonic nodes on each of the 6 strings of the guitar. So yeah, so that's incredible, totally amazing. Plays itself. You don't even have to do anything. And then let's see. And then this guitar has been my main travel guitar. It's made by Rick Toon, and I've had this since 2014, and this has definitely seen the most travel for sure, of any of my instruments. So let's see. It's called the Walrus, and I'll show you why in a second. So it's very unusual, but it's a conventional guitar. In the back, I don't know if I can get far enough back, but it looks like a walrus to me.
Yeah.
So this fretted neck actually comes off, and I can replace it with a fretless neck. There's just there's 3 bolts here, and so this was revolutionary just because it fits in a suitcase, and also because it's amazing. Yeah, and then I have I guess 3 other electric instruments, with one with natural harmonic fretting. So the frets correspond with the overtones more so than with an arbitrary application of equal temperament superimposed onto the instrument. Another
is each fret split into 6 sections, or
it's not that rigid. It's I think actually sort of at the discretion of the builder, Lewis Waters, and he's in Australia, and so he kind of marked out, I think, the most pleasing or interesting placements for these different frets. So yeah, it's they're irregularly spaced, and in future iterations of the instrument, this is it's kind of a stock model for him, but as it sort of went through different refinement, he changed the pattern as well of the spacing.
Sure.
Yeah. And then and then I've got a few acoustic instruments, and I like all of it. To me, they're all fascinating. I mean, these are friends. I don't feel like I have any I don't feel like I have a favorite. I'll put it that way. But I do feel like all of them are very special to me. They're all good friends.
Yeah. Well, let's expand on that and talk a little bit about maybe your use of effects, etc., and amplification.
Yeah.
And recording.
Schroeder amplification.
Well, I didn't want to bring it up, but yeah.
Yeah, I went through a period where I would say for most of my playing, I didn't really use much in the way of effects. I just would play mostly with either with a distorted sound if it was appropriate, especially when I was playing with bands, but mostly just with a clean sound, whether it was acoustic or electric. And then I went through a phase where I started incorporating lots and lots of effects pedals, and I had about 20 or 22 effects at the most, and the pedal board was really unwieldy, and then I decided one day, I don't really want to do that. I'm really much more interested in seeing what sort of information I can glean from just my fingers on the fingerboard and the sort of energy that's put into the performance, So I moved away from those kinds of effects. Like I do have a few things I use, like sometimes I'll use a freeze pedal. Sometimes I'll use a Game Changer Audio Plus pedal for sustain purposes. But as far as any kind of like gadgets or whatever, what I've moved towards is physical implements. And, I have a few here. Like this is truly my favorite. It's called the Bird Slide. So my wife's uncle in Vermont made this as a letter opener. It was a gift to her parents. And I saw it and I just took it basically. And they never got to use it to open a letter.
Open unanswered mail.
There's a lot of unanswered mail, exactly. But it's really great for all kinds of things like swirly, whirly-gig type sounds, and I can use it as a slide or as a sort of butterfly wing flutter to pivot between two pitches, or and I can go between the strings and get the kind of like spiccato type sounds. Things like that. And then like this is one of my new favorite things. I'm not even sure how I got this, but it's I think it's a coconut shell or part of a coconut shell. It still says made in Indonesia on it. And I think you do something with your hair. I don't really have any hair, but you can tie up your hair in some way. And so I use this as like a slide, but it gives you really irregular results. So it's kind of interesting for adding some chance operations.
Sure.
And then this piranha bow, which I've had for a really long time. This is great. You can kind of hold it. There's no standard way to hold it, but you just you can approximate rapid bowing technique.
Do you use rosin on that?
Yeah. And it's interesting because it's rigid. There's a piece of foam, and then the hairs sort of conform to the curve of that foam. So it sort of mutes itself as you're playing, but if you're delicate with it, you really do get an approximation of a good bowing sound. So all this to say, I was really focused on just the instruments and then secondarily pedals for a phase anyway, and then I love the little implements I use. But and then Tim Schroeder entered into my life, and it's no exaggeration that you got me to really hear the potential in good amplification. I'd never really considered it at all as contributing in any way. I mean, my experience with amps was pretty limited. I had a crate, I think, when I was a kid, and then and I remember I had a friend. We used to go back and forth. He had a tiny Gorilla amp,
sure,
and then and then we would plug directly into his hi-fi stereo, which was actually my favorite sound. You know, I think maybe we went into the cassette deck or something. And yeah, so that was about it as a kid. And then I was mostly playing just acoustically, or or plugging into a PA. But it wasn't really until until I came across your work, I saw a video of Nels Cline playing the DB7, that I heard something in it, just on a YouTube video. I heard a depth that I hadn't really heard before, and I'm sure it was partially Nels's expanded breath,
course, yeah.
But then I decided to contact you and see if those amps were available, and one thing led to another, and then the DB7's been a really big part of my sound since then.
Right on.
And
Wonderful.
And then you see I have the Ramjet, which is the preamp that can either be used by itself, or to sort of drive the amp. But yeah, I mean, I think through this, I really started getting an appreciation of what kind of densities can exist, or what kind of variety, especially in an album project. I don't like to have a sameness about it. I like to have some change over time. And yeah.
Do you find that amplification of this type, especially like the Ramjet, but used through kind of a wide width amplifier, if you will, helps in your search for harmonic content? Because I know that's that's a big part of what you do.
Yeah. Especially, I oftentimes I put a contact mic on an instrument, in addition to, if it has a piezo or a humbucker, I'll put a contact mic on, either at the headstock or on the heel of the instrument. And especially then, because then it becomes much more like an amplified acoustic instrument, where you actually hear the properties in the room, rather than what the humbucker or the is viewing.
Sure.
So yeah. There's definitely kind of a richness, and whenever I have to approximate the awesomeness of the DB7 through some other means, it kind of set a standard for me, in terms of how to achieve it. And I mean, I do, for practical purposes, when I'm traveling, a lot of times I don't really have a say in what sort of amplification. It's going to be whatever it is.
Sure.
And I can make anything work, but I also know what's possible. So I like to try to, have it be good.
Yeah, right on.
I do use, sometimes I'll just use a computer and, just have the plugins. And there are ways to kind of, to at least, get most of the way towards the sonic excellence of a really good amp, like the DB7. But, I keep it lively.
Sure.
It keeps me on my toes. And, but when I can come home and play this, it's great. I don't want to lift it so much, though. It's,
Feel free.
So yeah, I like having it in place.
So let me ask you a personal-ish question. So you're talking about improvising, etc. And earlier on in our conversation, we were talking about kind of really getting into the zone, if you will. I know for myself, as both a musician, a recording engineer, etc., that those recording engineer and the tech side of things, and somebody who's trying to get into the zone, often do not meet in the middle. And that if I'm trying to record myself, which I of course do, switching the side of my brain to trying to find where the mouse is pointed or whatever, often just completely pops my bubble. Is that something that you come across? And if so, how? No.
No. No. I mean, I relate, but I find it's all of the same piece, to me, the sort of engineering aspect, and that's been gradual. I never would have thought I'd become proficient at the sort of the mixing and mastering and just setting up. I mean, even things as simple as the signal chain and mic placement really eluded me for a long time. But I started probably about maybe 20 years ago, or actually, 25 years ago. But this is kind of pre-computers. I was a real holdout. I didn't really use a computer until, maybe like 18 years ago or something like that. I mean, I used computers, but not for recording music.
Right.
Yeah, I used to show up with this massive Mackie board, 16 channel mixer, and had an ADAT machine, and it was a real deal, but it made me feel good about asking for money, because it was obviously a Herculean task to get it into a room. So, and then as things started to miniaturize, the skepticism rises, and so so I definitely I moved away from the remote stuff, and got more just to what can I do at home, and all of my recordings, I mean, the big secret is life goes on. The kitchen's right over there, so there's all kinds of ambient sounds, and and dogs and people, and all these things are a factor. So I've gotten used to working with like an unacceptable noise floor. We'll put it that way.
and just more acceptance. It's,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's
I'm
more life playing a part in the grand scheme.
Exactly, and actually in that, and sort of focusing on the granularity of things. Sometimes you lose the big picture. Like I think of John Cage's thought about the difference between old music and new music is new music can incorporate environmental sounds, ambient sounds. It can incorporate life as it is, and so it's actually been really helpful for me to sort of see it in a different light. That I can have a little bit of life, a little bit of reality infused into this artificial domain of pristine, controlled audio excellence.
Yeah. I mean, I love listening to live recordings from the 50s and 60s before they, before they had in the box editing, etc., because everything had such a life to it, and every mistake just added to it. I mean, I think of some of my favorite guitar albums where you can hear the switch on the Strat going click click, and he's like, he's going for business here.
Yeah, exactly.
That click, you're like, all right, here it comes.
One of my favorite albums, I just revisited it recently, is it's how I was exposed to the Moroccan Gnawa musician Mahmoud Ganya, who was a Malim, which is the sort of high spiritual leader, but he was considered like the highest spiritual leader of the Gnawa people. And there's an album that Bill Laswell made with Mahmoud, and then he had Pharoah Sanders, the saxophonist, over in Morocco, and the whole album you hear children and dogs and cars, and it sounds like at times like somebody's playing basketball in the other room, but it's just incredible. It's real life. And having actually been to where Mahmoud lived, in Essaouira, when I close my eyes, I feel Essaouira. I feel the place. I feel the vibe and the temperature and the quality of light and the wind, which is profound there. So I absolutely love it. And I don't necessarily combine atmospheric sounds. I don't put them in the foreground necessarily, but I don't mind if things kind of intrude, and I feel like that just adds more color, more texture, more variety, more fun.
Well, I'm reminded to our collaboration where we were in my basement at the time, and we had Jimi Hendrix's In the Vibe.
Yeah.
And we listened back, and there were, I mean, it was a magical experience for me, at least. I mean, we heard the fan on the furnace kicking in at just the right time. I mean, it seemed like everything was in cahoots with us.
Yeah, and I'm not afraid of these ghosts in the machine, or the supermarket down the road switching relay stations, as the case may be.
Yeah.
It's
you remember
okay.
that from my house, I believe.
And that's truly, I mean, that's the big takeaway I have from my interactions with you, just in our discussions about sound and sound making and electricity. And I'm no longer, I mean, I'm afraid of electricity, don't get me wrong, but what I mean is I'm no longer afraid of its deleterious effects on my music making. I've learned to embrace them, because I could drive myself crazy with 60 cycle hum or tracking down why is that glitching? Why is that, where is that coming from?
Yeah.
But once I start to say, okay, these things, this is the way it is. And if I mean, what's the worst I can get? A bad review? I mean, is it on my permanent record?
Yep. Well, hey, we're running out of time here, so I wanted to touch quickly on your Bandcamp site, and so maybe you could kind of give people who aren't necessarily, there's a lot there. So
there's a lot there.
To read through. So I some of my favorite pieces on there. I love the Thunder Ohm stuff.
Oh, thanks.
And I think that's probably the most palatable for maybe a transition for people who are mainstream music people to go, to the other side, if you will.
Yeah.
I love it because it's clearly you. It's clearly all these things that we've been speaking of for the past hour, but it's got it's got a framework and a drive that I can comprehend without having to think about it necessarily, or not think about it.
Yeah.
And I find it extremely exciting, and it's just very cool. I think. Do you remember which one is my favorite? It's the
maybe
Pocket Full of Claptonite, maybe, or
well. So those are two separate bands. So Pocketful of Claptonite is the core of it is myself and Jamie DeRevere on drums and Darren Cook on double bass, and that group has a pretty wide range of operation, from sort of jazz inspired, or at least 60s kind of fire music. Stuff, all the way to completely abstract, and then sometimes even tuneful, or even actual tunes, and I love that group. And then there's Thunder Ohm, which the core of Thunder Ohm is myself and John Norris on drums and Brad Bassler on piano, and I would say, overall Thunder Ohm is the more accessible of those two groups for sure. There's a sort of there is a sort of linearity about the group, or a sort of structural element to it that that is not my typical, I suppose, but it works in that context. And there's an album called Katu Skoti by Thunder Ohm, Katuskoti. Okay. I'm not gonna spell it.
That's a typical spelling.
Yeah, it's the regular spelling. So Katu Skoti is really good. It's a very warm but pushed forward kind of recording, and that's really cool. And then with Pocketful of Claptonite, oh wow, my favorite is probably one called Urhop, URHOP. Which stands for Ultra Rational House of Pancakes. So Urhop and Katu Skoti are real good starts. And then you mentioned my work with Michael Manring. We made a studio album and some live or a live album, which was from 2 concerts. And there's a group name called Vectrek Centricity, which I won't spell. And the album is called Lifelike Boy Android, which is based on something that David Letterman said to me when I was 10 years old. I met him I met him in New York, just happenstance, and he called me a lifelike boy android on his show. So, it was taped and everything. It was cool.
Yeah, all right.
So lifelike boy android, and then live like boy android is the live recordings, and that was really special. That's also with Jamie D. Revere from Pocketful of Claptonite playing drums, and that one that was kind of just serendipitous, and it all kind of came together, and it's sort of like there's some expansion of the songwriting format, but there's definitely some things that are pretty tightly composed on there, and maybe a good start. That one's about, you have to scroll down a long way though to get to it on Bandcamp.
And what is your Bandcamp address?
Killick.bandcamp.com, Killick.
All right. And website?
Killick.me, M-E. It's the country Montenegro had that domain name extension, and so I purchased it just because I just thought .me was more interesting than .com. Oh, also Killick.com was taken by a fellow in Pocatello, Idaho, who I guess he's a domain name squatter. And anyway, I think he wants $800 for Killick.me, or Killick.com, I should say, but I'm not going to do it. So anyway, Killick.me. Very
good. Is there anything that you want to add before we move on?
Well, just to say, I'm very thankful for everybody listening. If you've made it this far, it's greatly appreciated. And thank you to Tim for vastly opening my ear eyes, and for being a good friend over the years. And I hope everybody's safe and well as can be. Sending love from Athens, Georgia.
All right, and likewise. So thank you. And so for everybody who is interested by these goings-onses, next week we have Jim Thompson, who is the owner and chief engineer at Eggleston Works, backwards speaker company. So that'll be fun. After that, we have Chris Mitchell on 225, who is the front of house engineer, amongst many other things for Humphreys McGee. Very fine engineer on many levels and has a lot to say. After that, we have David Solomon on 3.5, who is I'm not sure if he's the founder, but he's certainly kind of one of the higher ups at Qobuz, the streaming platform. And then after that, we have Danny Rabin on 3.8, who is from Marvin and a monster guitar player. Everything from gypsy jazz, Django Reinhardt, acoustic kind of stuff to very hard rock and otherwise. So with that, also should add that I just put up a new website. So please go to schroederamplification.com to see the new digs. And with that, I bid everyone adieu.
Thank you.
Cheers.